right. Well, welcome to Safety Nights. This is the show dedicated to the protectors of the industry. Every week, we're going to sit down with an elite safety leader to uncover the mindset, the frameworks, maybe some battle scars, hopefully recent wins that are helping move the safety world forward. Today, we're joined by someone who truly embodies that spirit. Please give a warm virtual welcome to Brandon Banner, safety professional. He's got his master's degree, CSP. He is spent a long career shaping the safety culture, leading high-stakes programs, elevating how organizations think about health, safety, risk, and performance. So we're going to go into that today. And yeah, let's dive in. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Happy to be here.
First things first, I would love, because this is the question I think all of us, have to ask ourselves at some point. It's like, how did we end up here? A lot of people don't choose safety. Maybe you did. But I would love to know just a little bit about what got you into the safety world and why you stuck with it for so long.
Okay. Well, you want the real story? I'll give you the real story.
So yes, the unvarnished.
Raw. Okay. So I was on active duty operational support orders for several years with First Army at Fort Dix after I came back from my mobilization to Afghanistan. And as my refrad date was approaching, I was trying to set myself up for success, looking for jobs. My best friend worked for Clark Construction. He kept telling me to send my resume to them. Kept sending my resume, never heard anything back. And then I went down to Virginia. I forget what bar it was. We were out having some beverages. And the Penguins were playing the Capitals that Friday night. And a lot of Capitals and Penguins fans work for Clark, I guess.
Right.
And we ended up running into the director of safety there, and he introduced me to the individual, and he was like, "Well, you want a job?" I'm like, "Well, yeah. I mean, that's why I keep sending my resume." It's like, if that'd be great. Yeah, I'd appreciate it. And so they gave me a call. A couple weeks later, I had an interview, and I mean, I had a little bit of experience, like through the military, like I said, the composite risk management process, but it was a great start to my career, coming in kind of like a blank slate and learning as I went. I mean, I kind of developed my career through, I didn't have a degree in safety. I wanted to I either wanted to teach so I could coach high school football, or become a police officer, or like a contract attorney and try to do like sports law and be like a sports agent or something like that. So this kind of happened intermittently, and it's been a blessing, to say the least. I mean, it's an interesting career. Sometimes it can be a little thankless, but ideally, you're not in it for that. You're in it to make a difference, essentially. And I kept chugging away through different seminars, professional development things, certificate programs, and then ended up getting my graduate degree at Eastern Kentucky University. I started at IUP and their safety science master's program, but there was a bunch of, I guess, deficiency courses I needed, even though I had completed 32 credits and only had 4 to go.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'll just transfer, like whatever. But Eastern Kentucky, honestly, it was a great program. Like both were good. Like I got a lot out of the science side of it from IUP, the why. And then on the EKU side, it was the so what, like how do you explain this to, whether it's an executive or, a craft person. So it's kind of made it my own way, just asking questions and nugging along.
That's a good question. I haven't asked anybody this before, but from the university front versus kind of the third party training that we all go through and certifications, what do you, how do you feel? And a lot of people are out there, they're getting degrees, unrelated fields, and then obviously we have to go get some certifications. Mm-hmm. But do you think there's some value in the traditional education? I know, and there are some safety and environmental programs now. I got some friends that are going through stuff like that. But do you see that value? Is it getting a lot more out of the third party accreditation? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it both has its advantages, right? So the third party accreditation, I can't talk. Those types of courses, I think, give you a lot of practical exercise knowledge. They give you the nitty gritty and sometimes more advanced technical skills. And I think you learn a lot from the others in those courses. Everyone I've taken, I've learned something new, which is the key. And I think they add as much value, if not more value, than some of the educational programs. Now, on the educational side, through the graduate program, I felt that EKU's program was extremely practical. The professors there who were all outstanding. I mean, they were at IUP as well, but I mean, I really got to know my professors a little more at EKU just through conversation and asking questions. They are very practical, practicality oriented. A lot of them have, they do, whether consultants or they worked in industry beforehand. So it was really beneficial just being able to understand how to take all these different concepts and then put it into practice. So how to, build and lead a program. I mean, it's like I know I had Dr. Schneid for a bunch of classes, and I know he's an attorney, but like a lot of his texts, which are behind me, have helped me throughout the last several years, just because they're very simple, easy to understand, but also practical. I mean, technical, a lot of technical language, but it's very easy to apply. So it's a mixed bag, and I like both options. I On the certificate side, though, I mean, there's like less homework, less papers to write. You don't have to read
Which is nice.
Supreme Court
Yeah.
case briefs and stuff like that.
I didn't even think about that though. You brought up a good point. I mean, that organizational side, which is very key to safety. I imagine college reinforces that a little more than your gun, run and gun 12-week course. So that actually is staying organized, where to get contextual information, how to do research potentially if you're in a position where you got to create a program from scratch. I could see where that would, how to present. As I'm
Yes.
sure you do, you're creating a lot of the
Yeah.
curriculum, a lot of the time yourself, or with maybe a little bit of help from somebody. So yeah, that is actually that's a good angle. I didn't think about that. So, well, this brings me to my next question. Then, you started in safety, and it sounds like opportune time, right? You
Mhm.
met the guy, and you needed a job. Was there a moment or an incident or an event or just a time where you really made the shift from, this is a job to this is a career?
Yeah. I think when I started working a night shift at Dulles Airport on a bag basement project. They had some pretty wiry millwrights, and they, sometimes they were a lot to handle,
Yeah.
and eventually it was just through conversation, not necessarily like, uh, you know, being a safety cop. It was trying to get them to understand, why this is important. And I think one of the moments was there was an individual on a smaller genie lift, and I came down into the basement. I looked up. He was standing on top of the guardrails. I could see his yo-yo on his retractable was swinging between his legs. So we had a know zero tolerance policy. So I said, hey, you got to come down. So we had to talk about it. Understood like what the situation was. His foreman was kind of getting a little heated on me and like saying, no, I'm just trying to prove a point and yada yada yada. I said, no. It's like, man, how old are you? I'm like 24. Do you have a wife and kids? Yes. It's like, if you fell down, you understand, you're probably going to fall and hit your head or something else, and you wouldn't survive. You're going to hit
Oh,
concrete
man.
from however high that lift was, and you're going to be dead. And then you have to answer for that because you're his leader. Like, how are you going to sleep with yourself? How are you going to look
Yes.
yourself in the mirror? Mm. And as the foreman was kind of lighting me up, the individual looked at me and he was like, no, it's okay. He's like, I understand. I made a mistake, and we never had an issue after that. I think in some cases, you got to build trust, but in those instances, that's kind of difficult to say, hey, you know what, we're gonna let this one go, because then if you let something like that go, then you're going to let other things go.
Anything
But
go.
I think he understood the rationale behind it. So that was like a big aha moment for me, because at first it was sort of rough. Um, but then again, like working on another project, I started to build some close relationships with superintendents, and just having them show me, what work they were doing, why things work the way they do, and what the process is. And I think when you ask those questions, you show curiosity. It helps you get an
Unlocks
in.
a little.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
unlocks a little. It kind of disarms people because I know from this perspective, a lot of people assume that people in these roles don't have a lot of functional experience or understand how the work's done. And if you don't, that's where you got to ask those questions. Because I look at this as, certain things. It's not the way; it's a way. So
Mhm.
you might have multiple approaches to solve one problem, and if all courses of action have their advantages and disadvantages, but you want to pick the best one that will keep people safe and also comply with the rules and regulations. So it's like living in the gray in some
Yeah.
areas. You just there's not always like a yes or no answer. It's like we have to look at this. Like let's look at the all the possibilities. And sometimes you get the answer from the craft. Like they are gonna tell you the best way to do something, the safest way. So then, and that's where you got to, I think, build those relationships and make those connections.
That's just great. It's a good story. Yeah. I was talking to a mid-level, like a division director. He just got promoted. He's a friend of mine. And he had to make a call. Kid got his hand trapped. It wasn't fatal, but it was a pretty serious injury. Definitely going to be a lifelong injury. He had to make that call to the family to do the first notification. He told me, he's like, man, I never want to make that call again. And it made me realize, because I always think we're always on the side of the fence where people don't want to see us usually, where you got your yellow vest on and you're citing people or you're correcting actions and everyone's there to get a job done. But when you have, I think, moments like that where you get to see the negative repercussions of not performing the task or not de-risking the operation. You can see when the production units are down, or we gotta work more, or whatever. There are some costs to having safety, but it's a lot more expensive to the
Oh, I
human
agree.
element,
Yes, it is.
in the org. So, and I've been trying to teach organizations that, because there's a ton of data, and I'd love if you have any correlatory. One of the things I always try to tease out is we have to sell,
Yes.
unfortunately, safety inside at the front lines, at the division level, and definitely at the C-suite, because we usually don't get budget, we don't have funding. It's kind of an overlooked until a lot of the customers I've worked with over the years, it was on the back of some major event, and now safety is the most important thing in the company after they neglected it for 10 or 15 years.
Yep. Yeah, it is until it
Yeah.
isn't.
It is until it isn't. And so it's trying to figure out ways maybe you've been successful, or advice that you would give to people to try to obviously the cultural side on the front lines, but also thinking at the board level as a leader, trying to align the executive team on projects, on progress, on plans, on funding. Where have you had any elements of success there? What would you advise?
Well, I mean, I think from my standpoint and what we do, the organization I currently work for with Pullman, we have a pretty good pre-planning process.
Okay.
And one of our retired vice presidents, we were doing some site visits to some of our chimney demolition projects over the summer. And one of the things he said to me, and I'm paraphrasing, but more or less like, if you plan your projects with safety in mind, then you're going to have a successful project. So
Yes.
it's it doesn't have it. And then another individual told me safety isn't everything; it's the only thing. But if you
Mm,
plan your project out well, I mean, there's going to be variability. You're not going to have a perfect plan, but if you have like your 80 to 90% solution with the understanding that things are going to change, and you have the ability to stop and change efficiently because you have that infrastructure in place with your execution plans, it makes it a lot easier to be flexible.
yes.
And like General Patton said, I forget the quote, but it's basically like, I'd rather have a bad plan, or like an okay plan executed violently today is better than a perfect plan
Perfect
executed
plan tomorrow.
tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. 100%.
because you're never going to have perfection. And
Mm,
we, in the profession, we're always hounding on like, well, the JSA, what does the JSA say? Like, I don't really care what's written on paper. That's irrelevant. It's what the discussion is during that documentation
Mm,
session. Um, if they understand what they're going to do and if they have the opportunity to ask questions, I think that's important. So you got to build it. It all has to. There's not. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, but
no, this is perfect.
with culture, it's not safety culture and organizational culture. It's one and the same. So if you have a good organizational culture, you have that safety in mind. I'm lucky to where our our the corporation has safety budgeted, and then within our branches, it's budgeted. Um, and if we need to make changes, we can make changes. If it's going to cost us like $10,000 to get whatever piece of equipment this is, it's going to save us a little bit of time. Also, it's safer, and it keeps people out of harm's way versus doing it another way. Where you might have a a serious incident that might cost you $100,000. We can explain that rationale. I'm lucky where our executive team, all the way up to the owner of the organization, is very forward thinking in that regard, and they're open to those suggestions. So if like I said, plan with safety in mind, your project should go well. And there's no perfect way to do it. Everybody has their own process, their own recipe. I think it's just understanding for us is to be, if possible, on the job walk, understand like where the issues are on the estimating side. When you do your post bid award walk, being out there with your superintendent, but also involving them in the process. So you should have all these different stakeholders involved, because there is a schedule to meet, and you've got to make money. But if you have everything lined out the way it needs to be in a schedule, in a certain order, you should have pretty much relative success and meet your margins. And it's never perfect, like I said, but it's a way, not the way. And for me, it's being involved in those conversations. And then if something does change, how do we address it?
Being
Are we going to
adaptable.
stop work? Yeah, adapt, and then make a phone call to whoever, because we have to manage change. And we work in concrete repair, demolition, and when you start peeling back the onion on a building, we saw something a certain way. Now you're starting to see the inside of what we're trying to fix, and things change. So that might
Right.
change the scope of work, and then you have to take a step back and plan again.
Well, and see, you pointed out a couple things that I think are good to highlight. Like, you're building safety culture because everyone's involved on the planning process,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
you as a safety professional are going out in the field trying to understand what's trying to be, what's the accomplishment goal. And I've seen this with a lot of great leaders that I've worked with, that their goals align with the goals of the people in the field, and the field workers feel that, right? Because then you're on a shared mission, and it's a little bit more quid pro quo and a little less, this is the safety rules and we got to follow the regs. We're both out here to get a job done. The way that I'm going to try to do it is to make sure everyone goes home tonight. And if we do it that way, it's also, we're going to have less time down. We're going to have, a more efficient product or projection, more predictable outcomes, being safe. But the other thing that I really liked is you guys, safety's not stopping. It sounds like there's a lot of stop points
Yep.
during
There are.
projects where you guys are taking a beat and you guys are reassessing, and that's kind of planned into that process. So you got the initial engagement with the front line, and you got them involved, and you're seeking to understand first, and then you're also constantly reevaluating, reassessing, and hopefully that's getting translated to the guys in the field. They've identified where their risk areas are. They know what they need to do, and then as things adapt, as you mentioned, because it's never going to be perfect, 100%, that you guys have a process that is accepted, because that's the other thing, stop in the line or stop in production or whatever that may have to happen in an event or pre-event. It has to be kind of baked in to the plan, because the guy on the front line is not going to raise his hand if that isn't an acceptable practice. So
Yes.
I
And,
love
and
that.
and we're not perfect. I mean, we've had it like we've had incidents. I mean, every
Oh
organization
yeah.
does. Things do happen, but it's the response to that. I think that means a lot. And then we also have we adopted the 24/7 safety culture every new manager or every new leader, whether it's like one of our union like foremen or superintendents, we need to read. It's a short book, but it's a good one. Just
Okay.
divulging into that type of not just safety at work, but safety at home, like throughout your whole entire life, like the whole process. And then on top of that, we have a frontline safety program where each week, our longer projects will have a weekly meeting. Um, Sometimes they get canceled, due to whether rain out or, there's a lot of things happening. But I would say 78% of the time, our projects have the frontline safety meeting, and that's a call to project manager, be the superintendent, one of the craft employees, branch director, a whole lot of different people, leadership at different levels will sit in on these calls, and they'll talk about just what's going on the project safety wise. They do a walk down by craft. They review our safety observation reports, and then a look ahead, and then what's upcoming.
Man, that's amazing. That's really good engagement from the leadership too.
It
It's not
is.
always the case I've seen everywhere. So that's a good sign that
Mm-hmm.
it matters at the top. The
Oh
top
yeah,
does drive the culture in
it
so many
does.
ways. That's the problem, and that is where I think safety guys get caught a lot of times in a bad position. They got leadership that's a little too outcome focused and not as worried about how that outcome is achieved, and then they got the frontline guys that are getting hurt, and they do need some authority, but their authority is usually looked at as a cost or a time suck or some negative connotation if you don't get alignment from the top to help drive that message. So that's good that you guys are
Well,
in that boat.
yeah, we're lucky that we have that. I mean, we have a great executive leadership team, um, all the way up through like our steering committee, and the different um, programs we have in place. I mean, it's a pretty big organization, so we have open shop on the union side, but as a safety corporate safety element, we all the directors of all the different organizations, we meet regularly to kind of drive the culture forward because we're making a lot of changes right now.
You guys are
To
growing, I
Yeah,
believe, as
yeah,
well,
we've
right? You
we've
guys got a lot of
grown
growth.
quite a bit, and we are in the process of kind of going into the sticky methodology, um, among some other things, trying to simplify some of our checklists and our inspections because, in all honesty, you get a guy who's out there, on a digital platform or a piece of paper, and you have like 200 questions. Are you going to really take a deep dive into that? No. So we're trying to really apply the energy wheel principles and then make it simpler, for the field craft because they're the end user or sort of service oriented branch of the organization. And I don't own the work. The superintendent, the foreman, the craft, they own the work, but we can be there to help them, and they also can help us. So it's got to be, for me, like a symbiotic relationship.
Relationship. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's good segue because one thing I always like to talk about a little bit is the future of the industry, but in a tactical sense, like right now, I've seen a big shift in technology. I come from the technology side, right? So building custom systems 10 years ago, mostly around EHS and compliance, and then moving into more third party off the shelf, multi-tenant. And now we're starting to get into AI and some kind of cool stuff, but it's still in its infancy. But the one trend that I really haven't seen coming, and I would like to get your take on this, we used to build these crazy complex systems for safety, for compliance, for JHA, for audits, whatever. And then as time's progressed, I have noticed even the larger companies are pushing more and more towards just very simplifying, right? There's this big push, centralize the data, simplify the inputs, and ideally then we have some more data and I think analytics on the back end to be preventative instead of reactive. Seems to be the trend, but is that in alignment with you guys from a
Yeah,
ideology technology front?
yeah, I would say so. Because the more stuff you have, the less it's going to get used.
That's
And I would say like if different like forms, reports, things. If you make it easier for utilitarian, useful, it's going to get utilized. May not, it's not going to be perfect. I mean, like I said, you're always going to have some kind of an issue. It's just the nature of the beast. But you're always striving to get better. But I think with a lot of the new technology, all these different platforms, they're all kind of one and the same, but they operate a little bit differently. Some are better than others, but ideally, if it is going to be useful for the craft, they'll in turn use it and it'll be beneficial. But I think with AI, and there's a lot of power in that,
There is.
as long as you use the information that it's going to give you and what you ask it to do, because it'll tell you whatever you want as long as you give it the right guidance to help you. So,
Well, and on that front, I mean, how are you feeling? Do you have any big initiatives? Do you have any plans? I mean, what are you guys kind of looking at, especially thinking about like the technology? I mean, it sounds like you guys are using a little bit of how important is that, for the average company, you think, to have mobile audits, or any of those kind of components? I mean, I've seen a lot of companies operate pretty well without it. I do see the trend that most industry leaders seem to have a pretty sophisticated, centralized
system.
digital practice to back it up. But I don't know. You're in the field every day. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, if it's all on paper, how are you going to capture the information? And depending on the size of your organization, you might be able to just build your whole platform on Microsoft Forms. It's a lot of upkeep to do on your own. But for us, we're a large organization, so we have an out-of-the-box solution. But we're customizing right now, and we're in the middle of a
You are in the middle of
huge.
it then.
Yeah,
Timely. I like it.
yes, it's a huge shift because we were using one system which was more like geared towards construction management side, but it's very siloed. And within the system we're going to have more like safety, quality. Hopefully, we're going to get some of our training information on there and to be able to capture all this. And also, through the use of not everyone's going to need to have their own separate login. They'd be able to use like their phone number
Yeah.
to log in.
SSO. Right.
So it won't
Yeah, it's
be
huge.
a heavy lift. It's going to be a huge shift, and it's going to take, I think, time and energy to train and give people the so what, why is this important? It'll be a challenge at first, but I think we will break through since we're already using some systems. It's just going to be trying to break through what we were doing before and now move on to this next thing that's going to be the future of the organization, like the end all be all. Because all we're in a lot of change right now, and
Yeah.
I just got done forming my safety team within the Pullman organization. We have a safety professional in each one of my branches, and that's been very impactful. We're starting to
That's
see
an achievement right
it
there. Yeah, a
is.
lot of orgs. Sadly, there's it's the foreman, it's the manager. He's not really he got a safety hat on sometimes, but he's not really designated. So that's a good sign.
It's been a
So
very
what do you
rewarding
think about
experience.
the future? I mean, if you had a crystal ball, one thing I love about safety, I will say, is I've noticed this trend. Everybody I talk to, there's such a human element to safety. I know a lot of people are really scared about AI right now, and there is a lot of displacement, and the market's kind of in an interesting place.
It is.
But it does seem like safety is a very secure profession if you had
Yeah.
to pick one right now, right? But I mean, your thoughts on that if you were a young buck just starting out, getting into safety, any
Well,
pearls of wisdom or advice
uh,
to get up to speed fast, to make an impact faster, to do more, better, etc.
I don't think you necessarily want to move fast. I think it's
Well,
a
there we go.
slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So you want to be deliberate, right? And I had to learn patience, and
Okay.
I've not. I've learned that through my three daughters. That's for sure.
Oh, I bet.
Being more patient, and you've just got to take a step back, breathe, and do. Here's the thing: if everything's important, nothing's important, right? So you're never going to get anything done. You might be working on a few things all at once. However, you've got to prioritize. And then I think first is seek to understand like what the operation is, what the goals are, understand who the people are. I think the professional will be around it'll be around forever, because we're never going to have people out of the equation. I know that might be the goal, but still, with software, with computers, with all this other stuff, all it takes is some kind of a virus, uh, whatever. It
Yeah,
can all be broken, right? And
very
what are you
easily.
going to fall back on? Is people, and people are still going to be involved. I think we can do a lot with technology to keep people in the equation, but also keep them, reducing the ergonomic strain. Like if we're going to do any kind of chipping or concrete demolition, you can saw cut, you can utilize different remote controlled apparatus, different exoskeletons. I'm trying to think what else. Cooling vests. There's a lot out there, because people are still going to have to do the work, and I
They're
would
still
imagine for a very long
interfacing.
time.
And those
Yeah.
are all going to have new safety procedures. We're
Yes.
all going to have to plan, right? That
Yes.
exosuit guy walking around is going to be
Yeah.
somewhat of a liability on its own. So,
Well, they were
no, that
talking about that as like a high level thing. I remember when I went to Valley Forge Military College, and we had to watch this like futuristic weird video in one of our classes, and it was talking about like exoskeleton suits, or so. It was like way in the future, but I was like talking about the future of combat and stuff. But I was like, oh wow, that would be really cool. But how the hell are you going to take care of all that stuff? When you're
still going to be people.
out, yeah, it's still
Yeah.
going to be people involved. But I think for a new person, like I said, it's just to come in, to be patient, be curious, and ask questions, and understand you're not going to know everything, and the people around you probably know more, will forget more than you'll ever learn, in some cases. So you just have to kind of humble yourself, and that sometimes it's a hard lesson to learn. Um, but for me, I think just having that a growth mindset, and wanting to learn, and yeah, and I enjoy learning. It's
I was
huge.
going to say that is something I've seen with you particularly, Brendan. I think that's commendable. That the willingness to try to get into the shoes of the guy that's trying to get a job done, and then help him, on the backside of understanding the work, instead of forcing a process without him understanding that you're credible. I see it. I see it a lot in safety, where the dude just shows up and says, "Well, we got to do it this way," and the guy's like, "I've been doing this 20 years," and they're sadly, I don't think that argument's going to go anywhere. But man,
No,
if they feel like you care enough to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and then maybe we got to make some tweaks, or we got to identify some risks. But they hear them first. I've heard you say that a few times. I think that's probably one of the best lessons for everyone out there listening. We got two ears and one mouth, so
yep, you got to
use
keep
them
them open.
accordingly.
You got to be able to
Absolutely.
listen. And I mean, I learned some hard lessons over the years, that's for sure. And
That's how
you know,
wisdom comes, right? You gotta.
and
I seem to only learn the hard way myself. I can relate
yeah,
to that.
well, it's like 2021 was a tough year, but I had to like kind of reground myself, and then I did, and it had like everything that happened for a reason, and like I'm better, like mentally, physically, spiritually. I have not had a bad day where I work right now ever. I mean, there's been some challenging times, but I don't have like any chest pain or like anxiety. It's just like, well, you know what, something happened. Let's figure it out. I mean, I don't. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but I don't necessarily worry about, is this a recordable or not. Like, okay, if it is great. Let's just move on. We'll figure out why it happened, and let's not have it happen again. And I'm hoping that the industry in general shifts away from that and how they evaluate companies, because
Yes.
the way I see it is, you are going to transfer the risk to us to do this work, um, and there's a lot of variability, and sometimes even the best laid plans sometimes fail. And how do we set them up for success, so if something does happen, it has minimal effects, and that goes back into the planning. I know there's this now new, I don't want to call it new, but like failing safely. It's not necessarily a bad thing. When we have an incident, now I'm trying to have my crew or my guys ask, well, even though this occurred, like what went right, right? So, for instance, recently we had someone working under a bridge. He kind of was trying to duck under a piece of angle iron that was kind of making a I don't call it a crawl space, but he had the duct to go under it on this piece of scaffold. And he hit him in the eye in between the hard hat, but he was wearing his safety glasses.
Oh,
Where the glasses hit, he was moving fast enough where that inertia hit the glass and then caused the laceration. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. I mean, in all
good.
honesty, he was wearing
Yes,
his safety glasses. It could have been a lot worse, right? So we have to look at those wins. We have a tendency to always focus on the negative, and I used to fall into that trap. But you got
that's
to look
it.
at
That is
what went right.
exactly.
What did go
That is
right?
it. That is something actually, and I had another safety leader, a mentor of mine, that he's a big company, and they're having incidents. They're having SIFs. There's I think they're 12 billion now. They're just at that size where it may not be feasible for him as the VP global to expect that it's going to be a zero. We're going to get as close as we can, but that's one thing he started doing. They have and you guys might do this too, where you send out the incident reports. Well, part of that process is now they'll send out preventatives. Like there is included kind of here's some negatives that we're addressing. Here's what we're doing about it. But they also have included some safety wins, and however that looks. That story, for example, could have been a safety win because we're looking at something that had a SIF potential risk on the worst side, turned into a minor non-life threatening, non-life changing incident just by wearing PPE.
Exactly. Something
just
that
by doing the one basic thing right. Such a huge shift. That's awesome. That's awesome.
we've had some other examples like that, but I mean, it's like I used to fall in those traps. It's like record blah blah blah. You get pissed off, and it's like not anymore. I mean, if it happens, it happens. And then once you start digging into the details, you're looking at all the different aspects, right? So it's looking at schedule pressure. Are we looking at the fatigue factor? Are these guys travelers? When's the last time they were home? What's on their mind? I mean, there's a lot of different factors that go
There's so
into
many
an
factors.
incident, and we expect perfection, but I don't. You can reach for it, but you're never going to get it. I mean, even like when I did coach high school football for a little while, and on a basic play, you may not get every single block, but the key blocks you do get, like if you're going to run, a power G, if your fullback does not get a kick out block on the defensive end, your running back's going to get killed. But let's say he's coming down hard and you get a chip on him, but he gets enough to cut it up inside and get into the linebackers or whatever. You just got a 4 or 5 yard gain, even though it wasn't a perfect play. It's kind of the same thing, in this instance. It's trying to find, the good in what we're doing and show that
No, I think you're
appreciation. You got to show
so right.
appreciation to the crews, because
Well,
if
in the
it's
crews, I think the front lines need it the most
yeah,
too. And I think that is an area in safety. I really do believe that's something that the companies that are trying to celebrate. I mean, even I don't know if you guys have one, but like having a near miss practice, depending on how it is, it's nice to recognize people when they're getting reports or getting some calls, having some sort of process internally where it should matter, because it does matter. But we're always smacking hands, and there's not enough kudos and commendations. You know what I mean? And that, especially as a safety leader, when all you're looking at is all the bad things
yep.
all day, all your metrics are pretty much negative KPIs. That's a tough job.
But
That's
you
a
can
tough job.
actually take, like, I feel like the more incidents you have reported, and I'm saying overall incidents, not just you would want like your incidents reported, like if you're going to capture that data and those rates, you would want your incidents reported to be higher than your injury occurrence
Yes.
rate, right?
Yes.
So I know that sounds counterintuitive, but
Counterintuitive,
when
but
I
yes,
worked
no,
in
I
oil and
get it.
gas, I would reward. We went through this like CA shorts, like I don't know if you ever heard of it. They had like the stamps program where you could get stamps and get stuff out of a catalog. Like they
Okay.
had some cool stuff,
That's cool.
but like if you reported a near miss or a first you got injured, like I'd be like, here's 25
There we go.
stamps. It's like $25,
Yes.
towards your stamp collection, and you could get whatever you wanted. So I'd rather know about it than not, because bad news does not get better with time. So that's for sure.
Tell you, and this is off the books, I guess for the audience it's fine, it's not proprietary, but I was working for an AI company for a long time, and they were doing safety monitoring, near miss monitoring. And it's not hard data. This is anecdotal. But what we found was if you had a camera and you had AI watching the floor for specific risk behaviors, and then we compared those to how much those risk behaviors were normally reported, it was like 3 to 5%. So what the AI would capture pretty accurately versus what is self-reported in the field is probably 3 to 5%. And when you think about that with the Heinrich triangle, thinking how many near misses are going to lead to an incident, to an event, right? There's probably some correlation there that's mostly fixed. If we're only getting 3 to 5% of the data, we might be a lot closer to, a bigger issue than we realize. And not incentivizing not having a practice is kind of crazy because you're just reacting. And I think
You're missing
that's
opportunities.
the big shift I'm seeing in safety is like there's companies that are compliant, and then there's a lot of companies that are really trying to go beyond, because compliance is just doing the investigations.
That, or just like doing the speed limit, right?
Yeah,
Doesn't mean you're a safe
right.
driver. You might never look at your mirrors. You might still hit stuff, but you're going to 25 miles per hour.
Yeah, that's the big key. Well, couple rapid fire questions, and we'll close this out. I really appreciate the time. I think it's great.
I'm enjoying it.
Underrated safety belief for you? Anything you would say that people don't value as much as they should?
Oh, that's a good question. Things that someone not value that they should. Man,
Giving you some hard ones, I know.
yeah, that's a tough one. I would say, based on a past experience, when I went from Clark to another organization, and it was sort of a challenging experience because it was a field service organization, and understanding that you hire a safe. They went through like 3 or 4 safety people before I got there, and so it was kind of a tense relationship. Got to the point where I was like, you know what, when you guys are ready, just come to me. But when you get a new person, look at them as a valued asset and in a blank slate, right? So it's a blank canvas. You can both teach each other things. So have an open mind. I think have an open mind, and on a leadership standpoint, and then on the new person standpoint, is key. I think that's definitely underrated, having an open mind.
Yeah. No, it kind of ties into like you were saying, ask, listen in first, looking at their perspective, that a lot of that open mind, I think that's good. Okay. Flip side of this, most overrated metric in safety, overrated practice, if you want.
Looking at like your EMR and your injury rates, and
Okay.
it's like, whatever, great, your EMR is high, okay, whatever. We're we're assuming the risk
Yes.
of high risk activities, so you're transferring that to us, and then you want us to be perfect. I think that, and then like kicking people off of projects. What are you doing when you do? Sometimes you have to, but I am a firm believer in trying to give someone a chance, right? But sometimes you got to set a precedent. If someone did something they're not supposed to and they know it, but for me, it's trying to reach that person so they don't make that same mistake again, because it could cost them, or getting to understand that. And I know it's a delicate balance, right? Because there are HR policies, safety policies, things where there's zero tolerance, but did we really set that individual up for success? If it's someone that's tenured, that has been with the organization for a long time, different story. If it's a new person,
Right.
what was their training like? How are they prepared for this? Not every person comes in knowing everything, and you have to understand that and give them the opportunity. And like I said, on the EMR stuff, the TRR things, why do I have to explain to you why we have these rates? ideally, sometimes things happen, right?
And they do.
Sneeze and you pull a muscle on your back. I mean, you take a step and your ankle gives out. I mean, there's a lot of soft tissue things. Some stuff we do to ourselves, but in other cases, sometimes weird things just happen.
Just happen.
And we've got to take care of the individual first and foremost, and understanding we have to record it a certain way. But
Yep.
I feel
No,
like
I hear that. I hear that a lot. I agree. I mean, I won't call anyone out, but I was doing reporting for a long time, doing GRI 3 mapping and sustainability reporting and all of that jazz. And safety is obviously a huge component of that. And I had a construction company that was way below the industry average, DART, TRIR, et cetera. And they were, pushing that message. And when we did a little more digging into why, it's like, man, these guys are exemplary. They're like half the industry rate. Well, it's because they pretty much just contracted out all the risk.
Yep. You're subbing it out, or
I mean, if we looked at all their subs, it probably would tell a story that they were, at or maybe even worse than the average. But on paper, so there is. I agree with you. I think there's a lot of room for improvement in how organizations measure. And I'm of the mind, and I push this down the line, especially as technology gets better, as the practices get better, as we develop. There is a direct right now, and there have been some studies on this. We have not decreased the fatality rate on average. We've done really well with minor and major incidents, but the fatalities are not getting addressed. We've been pretty stagnant for like the last 7 to 8 years on fatality reduction. And I think the reason for that, and this is hypothetical, I think the reason for that is we're still not quite getting that leading. We're still doing too much reactionary work. And as you mentioned, there's so many human components that I think it's very hard, like you're saying. And I have clients, again, back in the AI world. I am excited about AI. I think that's one area where we even could have spent some more time on that. But, we were identifying the night shift. They were doing a lot of shortcuts that were very high risk behaviors that could lead to a SIF. And we only caught that because there was cameras. There was no safety supervisor at night, for example, right? So there's these blind spots that if you don't have the data, you don't know how to redress. And I think that's probably closing the loop on those big top line incidents a little bit, is figuring out a way to start more focus on leading metrics and less focus on the TRIR and the darts. That's the score of the game, and we got to figure out how to run the plays.
Yeah, the plays.
Sports analogy, right? The game will take care of itself.
Well, and the thing with those injury rates too is that's all based off the size of your organization. If you have a small company and you're working, it's easy to. So you're on a large project, right? Let's say you have 2 different construction management firms. They're taking your man hours plus the man hours of all those other contractors below them. They're insulating their incident rates. So now let's say you have like 75 people and you work like 100 and some thousand hours a year. You have 4 or 5 injuries. That's going to kill your incident rates, right?
Kill your incident.
And it's not to me. It's not a fair metric to measure because it's like comparing I don't know, a boulder to a pebble, right? It just doesn't. It doesn't. To me, it doesn't correlate. I could be wrong.
No. I think there's a lot to that. There is, and it's going to get harder now because I have noticed, and maybe you have too, VC funding, bank funding, extra funding, like all of this stuff is getting a lot more tied into that.
Yeah.
Some of it's the sustainability stuff. Some of it's the safety stuff. A lot of this is starting to become more important to the investment decisions and the board level decisions than I saw. I mean, even 10 years ago, I've been in the game that long. I've only been in like 14 years, but 10 years ago, I didn't see that being a major decision for funding for an organization or loan rate or any of that. Now it's like, we're using these metrics at that level of the org. So it's definitely
the overall risk, and is it versus the reward. And sometimes I think you got to let the organization prove themselves. And, in some cases they may prove you right. In other cases, they may prove you wrong. And if I may, one of the other more underrated themes is just understanding mental health. I forgot to mention that, the mental health aspect. And I know it's starting to come on the rise. Yes. But I think we have to focus on the mental health side of it too. Stress and like things at home, that is a huge impact. Because I know the suicide rate in this industry is very high. And it's something that my company is very passionate about. We have a mental health committee, and we put out a lot of information, and we have those resources. And I think as we continue to evolve that, it's going to help us help our people more on all sides.
That's huge. I've heard that a lot. The last conference I went to, actually, that was the number one concern right now was violence in the workplace, right? Because people, they get fired, they lose their, I mean, there's so many aspects to this that can be really strong impacts downstream, suicide, someone coming back to work in a bad way. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of angles here that are, and nothing's more important than work, man. We spend 80% of our lives doing it. So it is just so important that it is a safe and mentally safe place as much as we can make it to be.
Absolutely.
If there is a book or a methodology, is there anything that you would share that you're like, hey, this is something that helps you, as a leader, as a safety leader, maybe specifically, anything that you would suggest to a friend?
Yeah, a simple read.
I figured with how many books you had, that might be the angle.
So there's a couple.
Okay.
I've read a lot of Patrick Lencioni books, and then the one that I really enjoyed, actually a couple, was
right there.
Strengths-Based Leadership, which is a good one, and there's more, but Leadership U, Accelerating Through the Crisis Curve. We're always in a state of infinite crisis, but this has, it's like tabbed. There's a lot of good lessons learned in this book. And then another one that I just started reading that I got from Jake Mazalevich, 7 Practical Steps, How to Build Reliability, Safety, and Trust in Technical Teams. There's a lot more out there, but I think, understanding leadership principles is key. And then getting, some of those technical skills out of other books, text. Jake has a lot of great stuff. And then there's obviously there's other authors out there, but I'm most familiar with Jake. I'm going to try to get him to come do a workshop next. Didn't work out this year, but next year with my team.
There we go.
We're actually going to do a book study on this text. Read a chapter, and then discuss it. Not read it beforehand, and then we'll discuss after. But it's an opportunity for us to kind of put our heads together on things.
I love that.
Those are a couple books that I really enjoyed.
Well, there we go. Well, I want to say thank you. We used all the time and then some, and I really appreciate it today. I hope everyone listening in got something out of it. This is going to go out. I mean, Brandon, you guys know, but we already have 13,000 people, all safety professionals in this community. And, given how niche our industry is, that's a group right there. And so I appreciate you taking the time and sharing the knowledge, and hope everyone gets something out of it.
I appreciate the opportunity. It was great talking with you, and I'd be happy to do it again. It's fun just being able to bounce ideas and answer some questions. There's never necessarily the right answer, but like I said, there is a way, not the way, it's a way, not the way. There's multiple ways to do it, and I guess for me, my other advice would be is just to help each other out. Whatever resources you may have, people should share things because, safety is not a secret. It's not a secret. No,
safety is not a secret. It's not proprietary. I've been saying that for years. It's not proprietary. So
I'm always willing to share stuff, and things that I've learned or even where I've failed. I'm always happy to help people with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And thank everyone that tuned in today. We'll be back next week with another one.
Yep. Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.